StraighTAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques, all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, I'm going to share with you some books that you should read. I'm going to recommend some books for all of you to read. Doesn't matter where you are from, what's your background, and I'll explain why I chose these specific books in a moment. But before we get into that, let me remind everybody or inform you, I send out a text message every morning called the Daily Motivation. This message is guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start the day. You don't believe me? Text me and you can find out. Get 1 or 2 or 3 days or 10 days worth of text. And if I'm lying, just unsubscribe and stop getting the text if I'm lying. But check it out and then you can decide for yourself. All you got to do to get this text is to text me right now, my number, which is 305-384-6894. And every morning when the Daily Motivation text goes out, because you're a member of my text community, you'll be getting that message straight to your phone. And it's going to do exactly what I said it's going to do. And if it doesn't, again, you can unsubscribe and get your money back, because it didn't cost you anything to get it in the first place. So that number is down below in the description. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That is where I do all my coaching. That is where all of my programs are for any of you. If you ever have wanted to work with me directly, you want to work with someone who actually knows how to get your business going where it needs to go, someone who knows how to help you get unstuck. Any of you who feels like you are not consistent enough, you are not, you don't have the right strategy and game plan to execute on. You feel like you've been trying to do things, but it's not quite working, and you are serious right now about getting out of that and ready to actually make something happen. Instead of waiting for things to happen, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. See your options right there on that page, and let's get started. That link is right next to the phone number that I just told you about down below in the description to however you are consuming this video or audio. All that said, let's get into this. Books that you should read. Now, I got asked this by somebody in my texting community. So, by the way, if you want to ask me a question or you want to hear me talk about something on this show, the best way to get to me directly is through my texting community. Doesn't mean if you ask me a question, I'm going to talk about it on my podcast. But if it's actually a good one, then I might actually get to it. So someone asked me this and said to me, Dre, do you have any other recommended books? Or because you talk about some books that somebody could read. And although I do have a book list that does need to be updated, my recommended reading list I've had out on my website, dreallday.com, for years. Actually, I'm not even sure that list is actively on my website right now because of the fact that we actually changed servers for dreallday.com. So I'm not sure that list is out, but I'm looking right now. And as I'm looking, it's not up there. I don't see it up there. But I will be putting a new recommended reading list out soon. It'll be out before the end of the year at the latest. We might get it out sooner than that. But on that recommended reading list, I broke down many books that I've read over the years. I'll probably to date between written books, but I used to just read written books, but now I take in a lot of audio books. I probably read 400 to 500 books lifetime, in addition to the 33 that I've written. And I will break them down by category. So books about mindset, books about dating, books about business, books about what to do with your life, and different other categories that I had. Then I just had a list of all books that might not be in any of those lists, but I just read them. I just wanted y'all to know that I have read these books. So maybe it might be something that you can just pick from that list that would be interesting to you. That's why I like the recommended reading list. And I put links to where you can go actually order the books and get them, usually Amazon. I'll probably put Amazon links to all of them on the new list that I make. So that list will be updated and it will be re-released soon. But anyway, since that list is not up right now, it's not active right now, for those of you who are looking for it, you won't be able to find it because I just looked for it. Actually, you might be able to find it, but I just looked for it very quickly, didn't see it. But I'll make a brand new list very soon, as I said. But I've read a lot of books since the last time I updated that list. The last time I updated a list was a couple of years ago, and there was probably 300 books on the list then. But I've read a lot of books since then. So again, as I told you, that site will be updated soon. So right now, what I'm going to share with you is I got 7 specific books that I've read that I want to recommend to you all. And I'm going to tell you why I'm recommending each one of these books as I give them as a recommendation. And again, even if the book is outside of the realm of your area of expertise, or even an area in which you want to have expertise, or an area that even You might not even think that you're that interested in or need to be interested in. You should read these books anyway, and I'm going to tell you why. And here's the reason why I'll tell you off top before I even get to the individual books. But each book I'll explain this. Is that first of all, you should be consuming material, not all the time, but a small percentage of time. You should consume material that is outside of your normal purview. Why? Because this is where you can get great ideas. Some of my best business ideas did not come from looking at other people who were doing the same business as me and then just trying to outdo them at the thing. It came from me getting that business idea from someone who was outside of my space, doing something completely different than what I was doing, but their idea, I could take the skeleton of the idea and apply it to my thing, and it worked. And one of the main reasons that it worked is because nobody else was doing it in the space that I was in, the way that they were doing it in the space that they were in. So you can get a great idea from anywhere. You just got to keep your eyes and ears open. And good material is good material, even if it's not specifically your area of strong interest. So let's get into this. Point number one, and I'm sharing with you some recommended books that all of you should read. Now, this first one is The No BS Guide to Time Management. And I think the title is a little bit longer than that, but if you just look that up, you'll find it. This is The No BS Guide to Time Management, written by Dan Kennedy. Now, Dan Kennedy, for those of you who don't know who he is a marketing, he's one of the founding fathers of what we now call digital marketing and online marketing. And he was actually doing it and teaching marketing before it was digital and before it was online. But a lot of the things that you could do digitally and online, he was teaching to do it manually, offline, and then, but because his principles were so solid, they could apply to online. So a lot of what you see in digital marketing these days, Dan Kennedy is one of the founding fathers of the current modern era of it. He's kind of like the bridge from the way back in the day, guys, before we even had computers, to today when everybody's doing everything on the computer. He's like the bridge in between those guys. He's been in the marketing world for probably 40-ish years. He probably was, actually not probably, I know he was in the professional speaking and copywriting and marketing business before I was even born. I'm 41 years of age, so that gives you an idea how long he's been in the game. And as of this recording, he is still alive. So Dan Kennedy has written several books, and he puts them under this, he has this kind of, what's this word I'm looking for, franchise, we'll call it, called the No BS franchise. So he has a whole bunch of books titled No BS. So if you look up Dan Kennedy and the phrase no BS, you'll see a whole bunch of his books. He has a whole bunch of books on a lot of different things related to business. And if you go read this one, I would have you start with this one. If this book speaks to you, then you should go get all the rest of his books and read all of them. All right, he has a whole framework and system called magnetic marketing, which is a teaching of just business in general. I've been in Dan Kennedy's programs. He doesn't teach them himself. He has other people he's sold the company to, and they teach the programs. But I've been in his programs. I've read several of his books. Member of his memberships. I get his newsletter that's connected to Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels guy, because they are the current owners of the magnetic marketing business and all of that. But this book, No BS Guide to Time Management. The reason this is the first book is, first of all, this is not one of the books that I was referring to a minute ago when I said it might be outside of your normal purview, but you should read it anyway. This one's for all of you because all of you have time. Everybody here has 24 hours in a day, right? Anybody here has more or less than 24 hours in a day? Okay, so everybody has 24 hours in a day. This book right here, especially for those of you who get to make your own schedule, is very, very important. Why? Because Dan Kennedy is all about, what this book is all about is how can you maximize your productivity by making sure you're paying attention to the clock and controlling what's going on with your time rather than allowing your time to be controlled by anything other than yourself. And this book it's hard hitting. It is very direct. It gets straight to the point. It might be one of the reasons, some of the reasons why I like it and like Dan Kennedy's style in general. And it really slaps you across the face and letting you know how you can make more of your time. And it also holds a mirror up to you to show you how you are bullshitting with a lot of your time right now. That's why it's called the No BS Guide. All right, that's the reason why he calls his books No BS, because even though he doesn't say it in so many words, he might actually, but for the most part, he's talking about the things you can do. But when you listen to the things he's saying that you can do, you realize all the things that you're not doing. All right, without him even saying it. By omission, he's holding a mirror up to you and letting you know how you're wasting time and bullshitting and not doing things the right way. And he talks about, when he talks about marketing, he talks about management, he talks about profit, he talks about sales, he talks about money in different books, not all in one book. But this is why I said, if you just look up Dan Kennedy and No BS, you'll see a whole bunch of his books on different subjects. And this is especially for entrepreneurs because his target audience are entrepreneurs. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you need to read the No BS Guide to Time Management because even if you're not an entrepreneur, you got a job, right? Okay, so you have at least some autonomy in how you use your time at work. So you should be taking a look at this book anyway, even if this is, again, not the main thing that you're doing being an entrepreneur. No BS Guide to Time Management. I guarantee you will get woken up, for lack of a better term, with at least one thing there that you ain't doing that could help you make more of your time. So look that one up. Number 2, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. This is, in today's topic, again, I'm giving you some books that you should read. Black Rednecks and White Liberals. This is written by Thomas Sowell, Sowell. I mentioned Thomas Sowell in a few episodes where I've talked about social issues, specifically issues around race that I've talked about over the last 3 years or so. Now, some of you are very familiar with Thomas Sowell. If you are, then you're probably glad to hear me mentioning him. And I am a fan of Sowell. I've read several of his books. Now, if you have never heard of Thomas Sowell, here's the first thing I want you to understand. I'm going to explain something. Thomas Sowell is one of the best writers out there. Thomas Sowell is older than Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy's, I believe, 70 or on his way to 70, pushing 70. Thomas Sowell is about 90 years of age, still alive, last that I checked. And he is one of the best writers when it comes to social issues over the last, and again, he's been writing even longer than Dan Kennedy's been out. He's been writing since like back when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were alive, back in the 60s. Like he was writing when my parents were kids. So now here's the explanation, because some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, Thomas Sowell, he's been around that long and he's written a bunch of books. Thomas Sowell probably has 100 different books between his books that he's actually written on purpose and derivatives of those books, probably 100 books out there. Some of you may be wondering, well, if he is such a prolific writer and he's so good as you say he is, Dre, why have I never heard of this guy? I'll tell you, answer that question too. Thomas Sowell, by the mainstream, Thomas Sowell got essentially canceled before there was a such thing as cancel culture. He got canceled. Why? Because Thomas Sowell is a black man, but he writes about social issues in such a way that doesn't go along with the accepted narrative. In other words, you could say, I guess you could effectively say Thomas Sowell's views lean conservative. And this is before being in the middle equal conservative. These days, if you're in the middle, you're conservative. So what we used to call someone who was in the middle in 2012 is now conservative in 2023. Well, Thomas Sowell was labeled conservative before the line even had gotten moved. So this is how Thomas Sowell writes. So his background is actually as an economist, not as a social issues. What do you want to even call this? Social commentator. That's not really his background. His background is as an economist, and how he got his start is that he would look at things economically and he would just break them down. He would just empirically do studies on things that the government was pushing to the people. That's you and I. And he would do empirical studies and he would realize, well, wait a minute, what the government is saying and what's actually true are two different things. And when he would start to point these things out to his colleagues who he was working with, like people in governments and things like that, and he realized by their reactions that he was going to mess up the whole system if he started actually pointing these things out. So he noticed that. He said, oh, this is a whole hustle. These people all are in on the scam that we're pushing to the American people, that this is nonsense, but they pretend that it's not nonsense. So for me to point out the nonsense is actually I'm wrong for pointing out the nonsense. And he decided not to get in on the game. He decided to actually go all in on actually telling people the truth as he saw it and could prove it empirically. So that's his background. Now, this specific book, because Thomas Sowell, along with Dan Kennedy, has written several books. So I want you to read this one first. And Thomas Sowell has several books. His books are actually thicker and longer than Dan Kennedy's. So those of you who have short attention spans, or at least you think you have a short attention span, you need to read this book anyway, because it will help you. It will help expand your attention span. I'm recommending this one specifically because this is one that I enjoyed this book so much, and it was so eye-opening to me that I read it twice. Now, Thomas Sowell has written books about economics. He's written about, again, all types of government policy. He's written about finance. He's written about social issues. Black Rednecks and White Liberals. What is this book about? This book explains where, amongst other things, you know how when black people are outside, and black folks who are listening to this, I'm talking to you, and white people who are listening to this, I'm talking to you as well, and everybody in between, you're not black or white, you're something else, I'm talking to you too. You know, in the United States, you see black people outside in public acting as if they don't have any sense, and they seem to be proud of it, and we laugh it off, whether it's white people laughing at it or not non-black people, or black people laugh it off, and we call it ghetto and we call it hood culture. You know what I'm talking about? Thomas Sowell explains in Black Rednecks and White Liberals where that actually came from, because a lot of people incorrectly believe that that is just natural Black culture. That's just naturally how Black people behave, and that was brought over with us from Africa on the slave ships. And then when we became free in the United States, we just started acting the way that we normally behave, and that's where it came from. But if you read Black Rednecks and White Liberals, you will realize, and Thomas Sowell explains this, and it's not necessarily scientific, it's not empirical, but he explains it, where this behavior actually came from. And you'd be surprised to find out that it actually came from white people. It did not come from Black people. What we call ghetto Black people acting like they ain't got any sense, the people that some of us Black folks say when we draw a line of delineation between Black people and N-words, that N-word behavior, that actually came from white people. That's where they learned it from. And in that book, he explains it. I'm not going to go and tell you the whole story here, because you should read the book where he explains it a lot better than I will explain it, even though I could explain it pretty well. And that's where it actually started. And it started with the settlers that came here, like the people who came to actually settle America before slavery happened. They mixed with the Black folks, and then a whole lot of other things happened. And then there was the integrations after slavery. And then you had a clear line of separation between Black folks who actually conducted themselves like they had some sense, and the Black folks who didn't. And guess what? Today, we still got that line. There's still a line between those people. And some people got a little bit of both in them. I would say I'm one of those people. I could be either one, given the situation and my choice. But there are some people who don't know how to be the other. They only know how to be one. And I know who those people are. I grew up with some of them. The whole point is this book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, helps explain a whole lot about the racial divide that some of you believe is very strong here in the United States, and why it's not as much of a divide as you think it is. And even if you think it is a divide, it's not because of the reason that you think it is. So read this book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. It will be very eye-opening for many of you to understand what's actually happening racially in America and where it actually came from. And then you'll realize why the stories you're being told today are not actually the real story. That's just the accepted story. Moving on to point number 3. I think we'll break this up into 2 episodes. Number 3, I'm going over some books that I'm suggesting that you read. Number 3 is The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. Now, this book, The Coddling of American Mind, is another one. Every one of these books I think I've mentioned at one point or another in some episode of the show. Let me define the word coddling so you know what it means. Coddling is to treat in an indulgent or overprotective way, or to cook something in water below boiling point. Coddling simply means basically babying the American mind. That's what the book is about, coddling of the American mind. And what this book does, now we're coming more into the contemporary era. This book, Coddling of the American Mind, these 2 authors go over what's happened socially in the United States over the last 15-ish years, and how people have been taught to, where we have overprotectionism, where we have safety culture, where we have safetyism, as they call it, where you get victimhood culture, where you have everybody's looking to find different ways to be victims, when you have people who are not victims, but they want to put on their Superman capes and quote unquote defend or advocate for another group of victims. So this is where it goes hand in hand kind of with what I just talked about with Thomas Sowell's book, where you have the white liberals who call themselves speaking up for or advocating for Black people who are, quote unquote marginalized. And then you got the LGBTQ marginalized people. Then you had the whole Asian hate wave that was going on for a little while, and they had the baton for a minute. Then you got the women, the feminism movement. They had the baton. They got the baton in their hand a little bit now. And them and the LGBTQ are pretty much holding it with each other right now. All of the coddling that has gone on in the American system of the rearing system. So basically what's happening in schools, what's happening in corporate America, and what's happening in the government has coddled the minds of a large generation of people to where this has become like a normal thing, to where you have everybody's fighting to be a victim. It's like the victim Olympics. Then you got every group is coming up with a different way to say that why they're being marginalized. You had the Black people, you got the gay people, you got the women, you got the whatever other group feels like they've been marginalized, and everybody has a different gripe as to why they've been marginalized and why they're victims and why things are bad. And everybody just seems to be so mentally weak these days. This has been manufactured. This is not something that just randomly took place. It's been manufactured. And in this book, The Coddling of the American Mind, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff explain where this came from, why it happened, and why it continues to happen. And they explain what can be done about it to reverse this effect, if anything. So again, any of you want to know where that weakness came from, or any of you who is a victim of that weakness, you should read that book and find out how you became what you became and how we could possibly change this, even if you're not part of that group. Number 4, I'm thinking, should I take this to tomorrow's episode or yeah? So yeah, what we'll do is stop it here, and tomorrow we'll do number 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we'll break this up into 2 parts, so y'all have some stuff that y'all can start reading. So go get these books. The first 3 that I gave you here today is number 1, The No BS Guide to Time Management by Dan Kennedy. Number 2, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. That is by Thomas Sowell. And number 3, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. Tomorrow I will give you 4 more books, so you'll have 7 that you can read and get yourself in the books. Get off Instagram, get off TikTok, and actually go read some books and put some substance in your mind and stop giving your mind candy. Give yourself some meat and potatoes mentally. Text me. Tell me the best book or the best point you got from one of these books once you start reading it. All right, so don't text me and say, hey, I like that idea about that book, I'm going to go get it. Tell me after you start reading the book. 305-384-6894 and workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to build some substance up in your mind to get to the point where you can be writing books and give people some real game. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. I will help you, and we'll get you there in less time than you think. Work on your game. Dre, all